Welcome to the third season of Her, the Afros and Audio interview series. My guest today is Amber Hurt from Sippin Sunday, adulting queen herself. Welcome. What inspired you to start Sippin Sunday, and how did your own experience with adulting shape the podcast concept?
Yes. So I started Sippin Sunday in 2020 on Zoom, bringing people together during the pandemic. And it started off with just my friends, family, but then they would tell somebody and they would come on Zoom. And I was doing it pretty much like every single Sunday around 7, 8 o'clock. So we would play music in the beginning. We would talk about a certain topic about adulting. We did everything from finding your purpose, buying a home, budgeting, goal setting, trivia. What other ones did we do? There was one about being an ally and just social justice and all of that. And then at the end, we started doing giveaways. And then we would talk about Insecure because Insecure was coming on Sundays during the pandemic. So that's how it started. And I think that it did become inspired by my personal life of just helping people navigate adulting in my career because I'm an educator full time. And I always was helping my students. And just even my friends would always ask me about places to brunch or travel tips or like, how did you do this? How did you do that? So then I translated it into Sippin Sunday. But it took me a long time to actually put it in podcast format on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, more so because I wanted to be consistent with it. I hate when you find a podcast that you like and then they're going and then they just never publish a new episode. You don't know what happened. And I didn't want that to be what happened with my podcast. So I did it on Zoom for like 2 years, and that would just be people come on Zoom, we talk. I would record them, but it wasn't really like podcast format. It was very much like we're conversating all of the background, kind of almost like a live on Zoom. And now it's just Apple and Spotify and YouTube.
Thank you for that response. What it sounds like and what's very obvious is that connection was key
Yes, it was. And it was
for Sippin Sunday.
definitely organic because as I help people talk about these things and I bring these conversations to the forefront, I'm not saying that I know everything about adulting or I'm a perfect adult. I'm bringing people to share their stories so that other people can get knowledge and hopefully learn something so that they don't make the same mistake that somebody did. But even if they do, it's your journey. So, however your journey unfolds, I just want people to kind of take ownership of adulting and make it look like what they want it to look like for themselves.
Absolutely, and that's what it's all about. We don't have to have all the
Yeah.
answers in order to be able to support other people and benefit from other
Yes.
people. That's the reason for it in general is to be able to have that ecosystem of
Yep.
support and guidance. So I love that. I love that about what you have done and what you've created. So you talked a little bit about it already about being an educator. So how has being an educator influenced the way you create content for your podcast, if at
Yeah.
all?
In the beginning, I feel like I was solely focused on college students because that was the population that I was always in front of. But as it's continued to grow, now I've had my business for almost 6 years and the podcast for almost five. I realized that more people needed it. And once I moved to Baltimore, I had worked in public middle school and high school. So then it had me in front of that population that I was like, okay, let me see kind of the things that they are struggling with or that they are having questions about and conversations about. And now my full-time role is like the perfect mix that I'm working with high school students and college age students. And what I really have found is that they have the same issues that we have, just in different ways. So that's where I now have kind of made my content digestible for anybody, but I feel like the people that are resonating most now are millennials, and we're getting Gen Z in, and it's mostly college age Gen Z students, I would say, that are resonating. But that has helped me think about how do I talk about things on the podcast, who am I bringing on the podcast, and like how do I want to market it? Because when people hear it, they think that I'm telling you how to adult. And that's not what I'm doing. I'm just having conversations that are open to anybody about navigating adulthood.
Yeah, and when you say with people that hear it, you mean looking at the title,
Yeah,
that's
so
what
when
their
they see
assumption
the
is what
adulting
you're saying.
queen, because I have done a lot of pop-ups, which also helped me to figure out kind of how to market it and how to grow it and like who resonates with it. So I think when people see the adulting queen, they think it's a how to be an adult, which in a way it is, but my style and my content isn't saying do this, do that, these are the steps. It's more conversational and like tell me about what you've gone through. Now tell me about your struggles, tell me about things that are going well, and how can we help other people.
Sharing lived
Yes.
experiences, both for yourself and your guests. And I love that. I also really appreciate the fact that you are paying attention, you're listening. You said you had your podcast for 5 years, which is major.
Thank you.
Congratulations. A lot of people don't last, but you also are evolving the content and you're listening to the people that you want to be a part of this journey
Yes.
with you. And that's really important for podcasters. So kudos for doing that organically, intuitively, and really making that a part of this journey for yourself. You host some live
Yes,
shows, and I know you have
yay.
one coming up.
Yes.
Right. So I definitely want you to talk about that, but it seems that they're really, really rewarding experience for you. So can you describe what these live events mean to you and your
Yeah, I
audience?
get like, oh my god, so excited again about this. So this year, 2024, I did two. My first one was in January, celebrating 5 years of the Adulting Queen, and I was just like, I just want to do something to celebrate 5 years. I want to do something because for the past four of living in Baltimore, I feel like that's what's also really helped me to grow my business and my podcast and meeting people like you and people from pop ups and things like that. I just feel like Baltimore has been very welcoming, and the people that I've met have been super awesome as far as resources, opportunities, just talking. And then it's like you front into people at coffee shops, grocery stores, and you're like, oh, hey, like, nice to see you. I didn't expect you to be here. Like, what are you doing here? So that's what I've loved. And that's what kind of fueled the first live show. Planning it was pretty easy because, again, for my job, I plan events. So I've done commencements, I've done orientations, I've done small scale things. So that wasn't the hard part. I think the hardest thing was being like, wow, people are actually in front of me listening, engaging, like you're hearing real time reactions. And then I just was so overwhelmed with happiness that it really did help me through the entire year, and then had me do another one in August. And as you mentioned, I have three in 2025 now that will be happening, which is super cool. And I think that the thing that I'm most excited and proud about of doing it is that I see like big podcasts like The Read or Shits and Gigs and like Sisters Who Kill doing it. And I'm like, oh, like they have such a big following. Like that's so cool. And why should I do a live podcast when I'm a small podcast? But it's like I should do it to keep building momentum, keep building community, and kind of going back to how this just started with being on Zoom and having people there. That was like a driving factor to actually do it and get out of my head about it.
I'm so glad that you did that. And it's a really important lesson for a lot of people to step out there, right? Do whatever comes up in your heart to do,
Yes. That
right?
makes sense too.
Um,
And like think on it. Don't just like on a whim do something.
Absolutely, but also there's a case for that as well. There's a
Yes.
download. It comes to you for a reason. And so you wanna do it strategically, you wanna do it in line, you don't wanna waste the time for yourself or others. But if it came to you, there's a reason for
Yes.
that. And that may mean that a next step for you is to have that stretch goal, to be able to
Yes.
move yourself outside of just the mic in the room, because I think it's important,
Yeah.
to engage with the audience. So I'm really glad that you decided to do that and that it's going well for you.
Yes. It is good. It's been like the thing that gets me the most nervous, I was just telling somebody about this, is the ticket sales because obviously it costs some money to do a live show. I will say that as I've thought about planning in the future, I've thought about how to cut costs because certain things you just don't need as you keep doing it. I feel like the first one was like very celebratory. The second one was my birthday time, so it was still celebratory but not as much. So now I'm like, okay, the biggest thing to think about is selling tickets because if you don't fill seats, you're gonna be talking to nobody and then be at risk for possibly having to cancel it, which you never really want to do.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a concern, and people not really knowing what the value will be, what's in store.
Yes.
And people, one of the things that I've learned is that sometimes we can think people aren't showing up for us, and a lot of times they aren't showing up for them. They have their own stuff.
Yeah,
They don't
I
believe
agree.
that they're worthy of being in a seat, right? And that investment in self. And so it's really that value in you being who you are, showing up and saying, listen, if I can, you can. We become possibility for each other, but also the conversation is very important. And so because you believe in it and keep pushing forward, that's a winning
Yes,
combination.
thank you very
It really
much.
is. For sure. So what do you think is the biggest lesson your audience has taken away from your podcast?
I think that they've taken away that they can make it through adulting and that they're not alone, which sounds pretty cliche, but I feel like when we're going through negative things or just your journey doesn't look like what you thought it could be, you naturally isolate or you naturally just think like this is only happening to me. But when you listen to the stories and you just see my content and you see what people are saying about their journeys, you realize like, oh, like other people are going through things as well that are very similar and I can make it through. And just because this bad thing is happening doesn't mean there's nothing good about adulting or there's nothing that's going well in my life right now.
Yeah, it's being able to speak up and say what's going on because chances are someone will hear you and like, "Oh, you're going through that too. Thank you." You know?
Exactly.
But most times we keep these things to ourselves and that is a recipe for feeling alone. So I definitely respect that. And to your point, you give advice on creating joy and adulting. So what are some strategies you personally use to bring joy into your own journey?
Yeah, I think one, it really does for me go back to my family. And I feel like they always were joyful. I mean, everything wasn't perfect, but I think that they already were super inspiring. So they kind of already instilled like the affirmations, the writing notes and journaling and things to me, like always giving me books. So transferring over into my adult life, like I still have that, like even just in my background, like I make sure things are like bright. I have words, I have things that I love up and reminders. And as my Afros and audio thing is actually right here, like I keep stuff like that up and around me. So that is number one. My dad always jokes, my sister and I, that we have so many words up everywhere, but it's because it just inspires us to keep going and you see it as a reminder. So that's definitely one. But also music, listening to other podcasts that are inspirational. So I really like the Mel Robbins podcast. I love listening to The Read, Sisters Who Kill, even though it's about people of color who have murdered people. It's just another form of self care and listening to a story and the way they tell it. And then also my little mental health walks. I'm very big on getting outside or getting to the gym to walk and do something that's moving my body because it really all is connected. And again, going back to before, and I was like, you feel like you want to isolate yourself, you can do that for a moment, but long term, that's not helping you. So I always think about like, how am I being proactive for my future self so that when I do have a bad day, my instinct is to turn on a podcast or my instinct is to go take a walk or do something that's going to get me out of that funk.
Yeah, absolutely. We can create habits that don't support us just as well as we can create habits
Yes.
that do. So I love that, and it's so important that if that's the message that's being shared because a lot of people don't even know like that we have access to things and opportunities to shift
Yeah.
and change. And so that disruption, and thinking of Adulting Queen as a disruptor, right?
Yeah.
In that mindset. So that makes it a very powerful medium. You have a great mission here, and I respect
Thank you.
that.
I really
That's
appreciate it
awesome.
because I think that one thing I've learned from doing pop-ups and being in front of people is like everybody's not going to resonate with the adulting queen, which is fine because I will agree that it's very much disrupting our narrative of what we've been taught about adulting and disrupting the thought that like you just have to push through, everybody has to be an adult, it is what it is. That's never been my mindset about anything, that it is what it is. It's like no, things can change and you can take accountability and do what you can do for yourself. So yes, work life balance in your job might be difficult because of the culture of your job, but you can still do things to make yourself feel joyful even if you're in a space that doesn't like give you the best for work life balance. If you don't like grocery store prices or you don't feel like you're making enough money, again there's things that you can do in the moment to try to like sustain. So it's not all out of our control. You have to control what you can control for yourself, which is hard for people to do.
Absolutely, especially when, socialized beliefs, learned behaviors are pretty much what rules the day
Yes.
for a lot of people. So definitely you right on point. So how important has community building been to the growth and success of Sippin Sunday and the Dalton Queen brand overall?
Yeah, no, it's been like everybody says this again, it sounds cliche, but if you don't have people that support you or people that are listening, you don't have something that can grow. And I actually was telling people that just from Sipping Sundays on Zoom, I remember before knowing what it was going to turn into, I was like, please follow, please share, because this will help me continue growing. And especially when you go to big brands, they want to see that you have an engaged community. So, like, share things. So now I just make sure that I'm on all social media platforms, even if I'm not always posting on them. It's just it's presence, people can see it. And then I think that, again, going back to being in Baltimore, when you go places and people recognize your brand, like, that's a really good feeling and it's cool to see. Also, I'm still like in my head trying to wrap around that people recognize it, because it used to just be in my house talking to my friends, but now it's like pretty much a worldwide. So community is super important, and I wouldn't be doing this without people. Like, I am, and I do a lot of the things that my business does already, but I am working to continue creating the image and the brand aside from me, so that when other people are helping or stepping in, like, you don't even realize that it's not me there, or you're just like, oh, I know what the Adult and Queen as the business, the podcast is, not just Amber doing that and being that.
Mhm. Wow. All right. And so, based on your experience, what advice would you give to other podcasters who want to create meaningful and relatable content like yourself?
Yeah, I always say just start. Again, cliche, but that really is what it is, because if you keep having an idea and you never do anything with it, it's not going to get anywhere. I will also say, realistically, it does not have to be perfect. Like, there have been some episodes when I'm dog sitting, the dog is going crazy in the back. And honestly, I keep it in there because I'm like, this is relatable. This is adulting. Like, things are not going as you plan them to go. One episode, somebody was knocking on her door. She's like, who's at my door? Like, I don't even know. Like, I'm trying to record this podcast. And I keep that kind of stuff in to show that, like, this is still fun. It just sounds like you're talking on the phone with somebody, and this is what would happen if you're on a phone call. And you also don't need to get all the super fancy equipment. I for sure appreciated at Afros and Audio when everybody was talking about those things. But I think that just from talking to some people, they were like, oh my God, like, I want to start tomorrow, so I have to get this $1,000 equipment. You don't. You can just start. I have my mic that I got off Amazon. That is the only equipment that I have right now. I use my laptop. I use my phone sometimes. I use a free platform online. So just figure out ways that make sense for you. And then again, when you're consistent and you know you're going to be continuous and growing, like, then you can invest in something because you know you're going to use it. But don't just go spending thousands of dollars on stuff, booking studios when you don't even have like the concept, you don't have the guests, like, you don't have anything else on what you want to do. So think those things through before. And then the last thing I would say is that when you think people aren't listening, they are, because there's so many times people are like, oh yeah, like, I listened to this episode and you said this, or like, oh yeah, like, I listened to your podcast, and you can't see the podcast listeners physically or like who they are. You just see the numbers, you see the demographics, but people are listening. So you just never know who's listening. And even if they're not growing in numbers immediately, a podcast is going to be there forever. So, like, that's another reason of why I really did start it, because it will be there forever and people can always go back and listen and keep sharing. And like 20 years from now, somebody will still be listening to your podcast because it's on the platforms.
Yeah, you're so right. I love what you said about graduating to equipment as you go.
Yes.
There was this time where Rodecaster Pro was the biggest thing on the market and people were using that. And it's a great piece of hardware, but it's got a lot of buttons that if you don't know what you're doing can make you say, you know what? Never mind.
Mhm.
And it's not how you start. You want to start in a way that you feel comfortable and is not super expensive, like you said. Even if you have the budget for it, figure it
Yeah.
out that make you feel most comfortable and really helps you to start, because that is most people's biggest problems, adulting in progress and
Yeah.
or already having been an adult for quite some time like
Yes.
myself. How all of that can stop you before you even start, you
Yes.
know? And so it's so important that you said that and that that is a part of the conversation that you have to really encourage people. Just start where you are. Like that's really where we get to go
Yes.
from.
You have
Is
everything
exactly
you
where we
need
are.
in the moment.
Absolutely. So for someone considering starting a podcast about adulting, what should they keep in mind to make it authentic and engaging?
I think about what you're good at or what you already like to talk about in adulting. So my tagline is brunch, travel, adult, repeat, because people will always be asking me about brunch tips, travel tips, and then just like adulting. My students would ask about trying to find apartments. They would ask about job hunting, like all those kinds of things. But it doesn't always have to be tied to your job. I just have a great benefit that I work in education and I'm able to be in front of the people that are my population and who I'm trying to seek, which has made it easier for me. But I would say if you are trying to do this kind of as an outlet or like a outside thing that's not related just to your job, that's completely fine. And just figuring out your best routine for how to do it, how you are going to find the people and who is kind of like your target. What I think about with if like who's my target audience is I say millennials and Gen Z, but then I also think of like the qualities of the person. So like they would love brunch, they would like going to Trader Joe's, they would like traveling, they would like self-improvement, they would be a person that's probably a professional working in a career field, like stuff like that helps you to think backwards to like what would that person need or what would they want you to talk about and what would they listen to you talking about.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's great. Again, very intuitive thinking around the work that you're doing, and I love that. And speaking of intuitive, you almost answer each question before I ask
This
it.
happens
So
so often when I'm on a podcast. Like you kind of already touched on this, but it goes back to my full-time
yeah,
job of like the out of the classroom work was very strategic planning, goal setting, like thinking ahead. And one of my strengths is being futuristic and planning. So that makes sense.
it definitely makes sense. It tracks. And so I appreciate it. So I'm gonna ask you a bit of fun and personal questions before we
Yes.
wrap up. And that is your tagline, as you've already said,
Yes.
is brunch, travel, adults, and repeat. If your podcast episode were a brunch menu,
Oh,
what what would be the must-have items?
oh, I love that. Somebody asked me a similar question like this before. I forgot how they phrased it, but I love fun questions like this. My brunch menu for Sippin Sunday would be definitely steak and eggs. That's one of my favorite things to get. Chicken and waffles, shrimp and grits, and then drinks would definitely be a Bellini, espresso martini, and then coffee or tea. And if you like sweet things, I would say some type of pancakes on there.
Nice. So all the good stuff on the
Yes.
menu. That's what you
Yes.
what you're going for.
Yes. I love like a hearty brunch that fills you up.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So tell us a little bit about some of the things that you were looking forward to when it comes to the podcast, the live shows,
Yes.
sponsorship. Talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I definitely in the future of the podcast, welcoming sponsors, trying to figure out how to navigate that because people have like donated or when I do Sippin Sunday live, like people are asking how can they help and things. But I really feel like right now for me to continue growing, I do need funding for advertising, for marketing, to like put it in magazines or articles or getting people to like talk about it. And I don't like having free work from people when they're helping you in that kind of way. So I know people will help me and my friends and stuff, but I like to pay people. So that in return means we need money to pay people to advertise, to help, to do certain things like that. Then the live shows you can support by obviously one, buying a ticket. The first show of 2025 is February 2nd. The next one is August 16th or 17th, whatever that Sunday is. And then the third one will be in November. And they'll all of them will be at Motor House in Baltimore. So first step, buying a ticket. Second, if you have a product, business, podcast, and you're interested in advertising through the show, reach out to me to let me know. And merch, I forgot that I have the merch. Like I have my sweater I'm wearing now, but I also have Sippin Sunday merch, mugs, crew necks, tote bags. I think that's the best way I'm asking people to support now is anything monetary. So whether that's buying merch, sponsoring the podcast or live show. And if you have resources of how to find sponsorship for podcasts, also welcome that because that is not an area I'm skilled in. I can write up all the stuff that the people would need, but then when it comes to actually seeking them out and figuring out budget and what would match, I have no idea about any of that stuff. I go to ChatGPT and hope for the best.
Shout out to ChatGPT. Also, shout out to Motor House.
Yes, I'm
Um,
excited.
yeah, very dope venue. We had 2 of our
Yes.
events this year at Motor House. Well, actually 3 of our events this year at Motor House, but one wasn't during the conference. So yeah, shout out to Motor House. It's a very great venue, and I love that you are partnering with them to have your live shows.
Yes,
That's
I'm
great.
excited and grateful. Shout out to Nate because we talked about it and he came to my last live show and he was like, "This was amazing. I need to talk to you so we can figure out how we can partner and do things." And I'm super excited and grateful that he just saw value in it and was like, "We need to bring this here."
Absolutely. And that's what it's all about, showing up,
Yes.
right? And allowing people to see the brilliance, the
Yes.
innovation, the talent.
Yes.
Yeah, and believe enough in yourself to show up.
Yes.
That's great, Amber. So you've attended the Afros and
Yes, I
Audio Podcast
did, as I
Festival.
have again.
Not only did
I
you
think right here.
attend, you showed yes, but not only did you attend, you showed up, showed out with Vina and BMO and had a really, really great session. So can you share a standout moment for you or takeaway that impacted you?
I think honestly the whole conference because this is my first time going. Last year I had wanted to go, but I think I was away or something, and I saw people in the area posting it. Vina being one of them, as I had known her personally. But then also I have not met this person yet, but the Booney Breakdown, I've been following her, and I saw she was at it. So people I was familiar with were posting it, and I was like, oh my god, I have to be there in 2024. So I'd already marked on my calendar. Then Vino, they asked me to speak. Like, do you want to speak with me? And I was like, okay, sure. Like, what are we talking about? I really can talk about anything. So I don't care. Just sign me up for this. But I think going overall was really great for me because I've never been in a space where it's only podcasters. It's either I'm at a conference for educators. I'm at a conference for creatives. I'm doing a pop up at some type of event, whether that's a conference or just a show or whatever it is. So to be somewhere that it was just podcasters and I knew no one except for Vina, that for me was like great because I walked away with so many new connections, people that have been supportive now on social media. They're tuned into my podcast. I'm supporting them. And then we get to look forward to next year again, just coming back together. So the whole conference was amazing. I really did enjoy speaking as well because I think for hours we made it almost like you were watching our podcast live. And I have never met Bimo before. That was the first time I've ever met him. And people were like, you never met before because we would never know based on the chemistry and how everything went. So it was a 10 out of 10 experience and people need to be there next year.
I so appreciate that. And I appreciate the session. I've heard some really great things about it. I've seen the videos and the images, and I only wish that I was not as busy as I am
Yeah.
during the conference to have come in there and checked it out. But next year, I will not miss your
Thank
session.
you.
I'll put somebody in my place. They'll play
Yes.
Talib for a minute, and I'll come in and hang out with y'all. So thank you again for your contribution and for your kind words. We definitely
No,
want
it was
more people to
amazing.
show up. Yeah, thank you. So, is there anything else you want to share with the folks before we wrap up?
Just repeating that they need to be at Afros and Audios, especially if you're a podcaster or even just aspiring, because I don't know of any local podcast conferences that are like this. I've seen some big ones that happen, but they don't, to me, seem like my target of where I would want to go, at least not now. So I think if you're just a small podcaster or new aspiring or even seasoned, come because there's so many people that have different experience levels and they're all willing to talk and connect, which is the best part. Because you go to a conference and you're like, oh, like I got to force myself to talk to people. Are people going to be engaging? But if you put podcasters in a room, everybody's going to talk. So go to the conference for sure. Yeah, and then just come out to the live show. Again, it's February, August, and November in Baltimore. And it's so hard for me to still figure out how to necessarily explain the experience to somebody because it's not just coming and listening to me talk. Like the theme for February's is creating legacy and celebrating history because it is happening during Black History Month, but also 6 years of the Adulting Queen. And the speakers I have coming are brothers who are in business together. They own multiple businesses. They do wine festivals around the world. So super excited to talk to them. They're my friends from undergrad too. So it ties into the theme perfectly of celebrating history, creating legacy. So it's just going to be a great time and you don't want to miss it because anybody that's missed it has been upset they've missed it. So
Nice. The same way I feel about Afros and audio. Be
Yes, via
there.
both.
Be a right. Be a Sippin' Sunday. I definitely am looking forward to showing up to one or two or three of them.
Yeah.
Whatever I can get out to. And I really appreciate your energy, this conversation, Amber. Thank you so much. Tell people where they can find you
Yes.
online, how they can listen to your podcast.
Yes. Everything is The Adulting Queen, TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, all that is The Adulting Queen. The podcast does have its own Instagram, Sippin Sunday Pod. It's Sippin with no G, Sunday, no S. I don't know why Black people put S's on everything because everybody will be like, oh, it's Sippin Sundays. I'm like, no, it is Sippin Sunday Pod. Sippin, no G, Sunday, no S, Pod. And that's how you can find me. And then it's on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube.
Awesome. Yeah, I get afros and audios all the time, and I'm like, Why the audios? Why?
Yeah, I don't know,
Why?"
and it's with everything, like, it's anything, they're gonna just put an S on it, I don't know why.
We'll have to do some research
Yeah.
where this S became so important to us. So anyway, thank you again so much. This was a great conversation. I loved having it with you. This is our first time really
Yeah.
connected, and I hope this won't be the
No, it will not,
last.
because I'm coming back to you with ideas and help for Afros and audio, and also just Sipping Sunday and then talking to you about, like, your knowledge and your journey too, so.
Absolutely. I'm here for it. Thank you again. This has been Afros and Audio's third season of our Black History Month series, Heard. And my first guest, this will be the first episode
Yay.
out because if I can get folks to come out on February 2nd, that's what we're going to do. So you take
You
care
as well.
and we're going to close this up.